Hi, and welcome to the May 7th, 2021 First Fridays with Robert Black. Um, let's do something different this month. Let's take a little trip back in time. Let's go back to the late 50s, early 60s. It was a time in the history of the instrument when there was very little solo music for the double bass, and there was even less unaccompanied solo double bass music. Maybe two or three pieces or four, something like that, but it was very, very sparse. Um, the ensuing decade, that was soon to change due to the pioneering and tireless work of the great bass player Bertram Turetsky, among other bass players, and also because of the nature of the time and what composers were starting to do. As we all know, the late 50s, early 60s was a pretty heady period of time. There was the status quo was being challenged everywhere on many fronts, on many levels, and there was a great deal of change in the air, and it was everywhere. Um, and there were a lot of groups of people that had been marginalized or silenced or were invisible, and these people started to speak up, act up on behalf of themselves. And so, like I said, there was a lot of change, and that change kind of, I think, permeated a lot of things. Certainly, it permeated the music scene and the art scene. Um, so I see a parallel here, uh, and this might be a stretch, but stick with me on this one. In that, around that time, well, prior to that, in the Western classical world, it was dominated by just a few instruments. The keyboard reigned supreme. So did the violin. The cello was up there. The flute was pretty prominent. But there were a lot of instruments that had very specific and important roles to play, but never had center stage. And so during that decade, late 50s, early 60s, there were a lot of players that started to say, my instrument is capable of doing a lot more than what I traditionally do. And so these players started to speak up and act out for themselves on this impulse. And composers took note and started to write music. So in just a very short period of time, it's been about 50 years or so, there's been this enormous amount of music written for the double bass, of solo and unaccompanied music. If you've been tuning in to the First Fridays, you know what I'm talking about. So today's program, we have three composers that were very instrumental, early works. Barney Childs, George Perle, and William Sydeman. And, it's always a great pleasure for me to share all of this music with you. Um, where else are you going to hear a lot of this stuff? And so we're at that point. Let's hear some music. So the first piece is by Barney Childs, written in 1960, written for the bass player Bertram Turetsky. And it's called Sonata for Bass Alone. It is in three movements. And the movements are meditative, with relaxed motion, and recitative, and march. So let me get a couple of things set up here, and we'll hear Sonata for Bass Alone by Barney Childs. Thank you very much. That was Barney Childs, Sonata for bass alone. Let's check something here. There we go. Okay, next on the program, piece by George Perle from 1962. It is called Monody 2. It was also written for Bert Turetsky. And this piece is in one movement. Yes, and thank you. Thank you for that. That was George Perle, Monody number 2 from 1962, excuse me. I have one more work for you today, a piece by William Sydeman. It is the earliest work on the program from 1959. It is titled For Double Bass Alone, was also written for Bertram Treitsky. And this is, as the Barney Childs was, and is in 3 movements. So our first movement is rubato. The second one is allegro ritmico. And the third movement is moderato. So, Okay, that's the show for today. Thank you for coming, as always. Um, Come back next month on June 4th, another Friday, first Friday of the month. We'll have another program of some really cool double bass music, which is, it's my life, it's my world. So it's fascinating to me, and I hope to you. If you liked the program, please, on your way out, stop by the box office and buy a ticket. And even if you didn't like the program, please buy a ticket. So thanks for coming again, and I will see you next month, June 4th. Thanks. Bye-bye.